Mr. Hart, for speaking with Central Coast newspapers once again. Last night's council meeting was, you had a smile on your face most of the time, particularly to do with the financial reports. You had the monthly report and then you had a quarterly report. Can you just go over with us why you were pleased with progress?
Well, if we just tackle the quarterly report, which is a statutory report that every council has to do on a quarterly basis, report not just the financials, but also how they're progressing in their capital expenditure and reporting about things that have been achieved and things that have been done, etc., etc. So that report covered off that side of it. The bottom line of that report forecasts it for the year end that we would slightly reduce the surplus that we had projected from about $7 million down to three and a half approximately. So approximately halved it. As the CEO said last night, he's pretty optimistic that we'll do better than that when it comes to the year end.
So that's the projected surplus, annual service for the
That's the projected annual service, correct.
So at the moment it's tracking a bit low. That has presumably a little bit to do with the lockdowns?
No, well, it's an actual fact. When you look at the monthly figures, financial figures, which we produced last night, which include October, so that's 4 months into the trading year, you'll see we're actually $18 million ahead of budget. So we're a long way ahead. And that's why both David Farmer and myself last night expressed optimism that we think we'll have it back the next quarterly one, which will be completion of December this year. Will actually show forecasts that are looking better than the 3.5, but they operate on a fairly conservative level, the bean counters. Yep. So that's how it sits at the moment. But no, the way it's travelling very, very well at the moment.
The point of concern which you continue to highlight is the Water and Sewerage Fund, which is the subject of an IPART submission right now, and you're going around the community trying to convince people to why the water rates have to go up significantly. That is still bleeding, and we understand. To what extent is that fund?
It is still bleeding. If one turns to the investment report as produced last night, which is the investment report for the month of October, so again 4 months into the financial year, in that report you will see that the total funds that are negative, which are externally restricted funds in water and in sewer combined is $44 million. So as you say, it's water and sewer still continue to drag the entity down. So that's from a cash perspective. We are negative in the externally restricted funds. If you look at the general rate side, you'll actually see we're in surplus there of 21 million. So our cash flow has improved dramatically. So net position, if you like, when you combine the two, means we're literally just a bit over 20 million negative total. Although we can't really look at it completely like that. But that compares to the 200 million, which we started off with in October last year. So 12 months ago, it was 200 million. We're now down to sort of almost 20 million. So that's really part of the good news story. Now, those numbers do change on a monthly basis because your inflows of cash from rates and so on does go up and down a bit. And also, as you've just mentioned, COVID does have an impact on some of the revenue side. So things do go up and down, but we've had the main impact of COVID, already in that first 4 months of the year. And as I said, we're still $80 million ahead on a trading basis, and we're down to sort of approximately 20 million on a net basis for in terms of negative working capital.
I can see you smiling on that. They're wonderful projections. A couple of things. How's it going with the report that the CEO is putting together about the corporatisation of the sewage and water?
At this stage, I haven't seen the report. I've had one involvement right at the beginning with the consultants where my views were sought, but I haven't seen any further progress on it, so I'm not sure where that's up to at this point in time.
And likewise, Hugh, there was previous announcements we might hear about the lease of the stadium, so that's just the status quo at the moment? Or
it is at the moment. It would be inappropriate for me to be involved at this stage because I'm the decision maker, so all I'm aware is that they're assessing the bids, if you like, and there will no doubt be a paper recommending something coming to me. I would have thought either at the next meeting or pretty early in the new year.
The reason I ask is Mariners fans do ask us a little bit about that, but the games are going ahead. We understand. Correct. We went to the stadium yesterday.
Look, there's absolutely no doubt. It was a great result for the Mariners in the weekend. That was fabulous, and hopefully they have a great year. Yes, we're very conscious of their position, and I can assure you that and the community. There's no chance that we would be putting in place the jeopardy of this Baroness staying here in Gosford.
Well, that'll be music to fans'
Yeah.
ears. On to other things that's propped up the budget. The asset sales. Last night you did publish a report about some of the asset sales. You were asked by one of the community why all of the methods of sale weren't listed. I understand there was a response to that. Can you take us through that?
Yes, look, it was a question from a member of the community, and it's a good question and a valid question. Public auction is one way you achieve it, and what I tried to liken it to last night is when you go to sell your house or a property, the investment property you might have, the real estate agent will advise you what their thoughts are and what is going to get you the best price. And there's various methodologies. You can put a fixed price on it, say I want to sell it for $1 million, or you can go to a public tender. You can go to an open tender in that situation. You can go to a closed tender in those situations. You can go to auction. So there's a variety of means.
You have a different methods
we take the advice of the real estate people and everything, because they're the ones who know. We are not property developers, and we're certainly not real estate agents. So we take their advice. But in majority, I think you'll find that they have gone through the auction process, and that was true for those last night. 5 out of the 7 have been through the auction process.
One particular property that was of interest in today's papers was to do with a property down in Bounty Close, where a price was fixed that arguably was below the market price at this point in time. Could you take us through?
I think that's the property you're referring to is the one with the training organisation.
Yes, that's correct.
That's. I'll put it this way: it was a very, very good agreement and deal that the training organisation managed to sign up with the council, previous councils, and unfortunately it was unbreakable, and we did have a good look at and explored pretty much every legal avenue to see whether we could extract a higher price out of it, but it came down to the end of the day, it was a watertight agreement, and it would have been a complete waste of ratepayers' monies to go through a court process to come out with probably exactly the same answer.
So that negotiation happened under previous councils, no?
Correct. There was an option in there given, and a specified methodology and a specified effectively price at the end of that, and that couldn't be shifted. Unfortunately, that price is very different to the market value, but one has to recall that there's not any individual benefiting from it. The ownership transfers, of course, for that particular sum of money that we've sold it for, but that organisation can't go and sell it now. They have to keep it for the purposes of what it was gained from.
So there's some caveats on that. On to other things. The airport was discussed last night at the Evergreen, as I say, issue trimming, and you resolved to maintain the status quo put in place by Mr. Person. Is that correct?
Well, Mr. Person had already made a decision that it was going to be an airport rather than just a sort of a landing area. And I went out and had a good look at it myself, and it's not an international airport, fair to say, but nonetheless, it is a very important airport, and it's going to become more important as Canterbury Bankstown's airspace gets closed down, and all those traffic movements in terms of aircraft will be coming up here. It's also a place where, for example, prisoners are transported, and the planes can land and take off from here, and they're sort of 12-seaters, so they're at the bigger end of the sort of that small aircraft sector. Also, there's medical evacuations, and there's also firefighting. So those we hope to be able to base out of this particular airport, and to do that, it's got to operate safely. So when it's a question of safety, there's no choice. You have to agree with it, because I was certainly not going to be the individual that sat there and said, no, we're not going to have that safety measure, and an incident occurs, and then the council is held legally responsible. So
I know that you were cited the accident in 2019 up at Sainsbury to trim those, and I understand from Mr. Smith the new CASA arrangements may obligate you to trim the trees anyway. Correct. Are there other things particularly that the council have? There is an infrastructure backlog, I know, that Mr. Farmer pointed out, which presumably is part of the cost savings, or why is that backlog developed?
No, it's an interesting thing. The infrastructure backlog occurs because councils, and I'm generalising here just for a moment, because councils, when they're not trading profitably, the thing they cut is expenditure on the depreciation line, in other words, the maintenance of their existing assets. So as that occurs, then the lack of maintenance then gets counted as what's called the backlog. So the backlog currently stands at just under $250 million, so it's $243 million.
Which is about the same as where it was
which
under
is
the two
pretty
separate
much
councils.
correct.
So they haven't made any headway. So
there's been no movement made in terms of in any significant movement made in the terms of the new council, Central Coast Council. So it's just maintained its current position. What we're spending at the moment just continues to maintain it. We are making, with the current budgeting process, even with the current rate structure, and even if we can fix up water and sewer, we are not reducing that backlog. There will be some reduction if we get the water and sewer charges. There will be some reduction in the backlog in the water and sewer area, but not in the general rate side. That will require someday down the track a further application to IPAT if the community were to agree and the elected body at the time were to agree.
Yeah, we note that you've put in recommendations and submissions previously pointing out the weakness in state and federal infrastructure grants, that they very often oblige the sitting council to spend money both on investments, co-investment, but more importantly on maintenance.
Correct.
I know you've talked about that a lot, it's a complex thing, but basically why does council's backlog why is it so stagnant over so many years that it can't seem?
It's a little bit like if you think of the state and federal level, traditionally you get swings between various political parties, where some political parties will build infrastructure and then another political party will spend money not on infrastructure but on other things. What they don't have in their public set of accounts is they don't carry that depreciation line. Local government is the only one that in terms of tiers of government that has to report its depreciation line. Now that depreciation line is the amount of money that through a series of calculations we believe we need to spend every year on the assets to keep them in their current status.
But this is real depreciation,
This is real depreciation, that's absolutely correct. So that's the money that's fixing up the potholes in your road, it's the money that's putting a new coat of paint onto the surf club building, it's the money that you see that's keeping the sports field being returfed, that sort of thing. It's called renewal money when it's the capital money, and what we have been successful in doing since I came in here is we've been able to convince both the Commonwealth and the state that if they can give us what I call renewal money, then we can spend it, and that is what is helping us claw back the cash position, because we've budgeted to spend ratepayers' money on, let's say, fixing a piece of roadway up or a bit of curb and channel which is already existing, so that would be renewal money. But if the state says, well look, we'll give you some money towards that, then we don't have to spend the ratepayers' money, and that goes through to the bottom line, and which is why we're building up surpluses, but which is also increasing our cash position. So
this is you're saying this has just happened recently, this particular...
Doing this is something I had to put in place when I first arrived here, because we could not start taking on new assets. And the number one thing that sparked the problems with the undertaking that the federal government had given for a car park, a commuter car park in Gosford, which is something like $30 million, and a very welcome necessary car park. But the point is, if we'd taken the money and we'd built it, we'd have taken $30 million, and then to operate it and provide for the depreciation / maintenance on it would have been $2 million onto our cost line, because they're not cheap buildings when you've got electronically entry and exit and payment fees, lifts to maintain, all those sort of things. So it's just that simple fact that there's no free lunch. If we're given something free, it costs the ratepayer, unfortunately. But you can work it, as we have been doing, by getting renewal monies, and that's helping rebuild the organisation. So was one part of our plan to make, to aid the recovery.
Well, thank you for that. That looks like a good reform in many regards. The last thing, of course, most of the state will be going to local government elections next month, except for Central Coast Council. I don't know if there's any other councils that are not in the election cycle. What's the projections of the Central Coast Council going to an election in the foreseeable future?
Well, I've made it very clear that I believe that democracy can be returned and should be returned earlier rather than later. So I've suggested to the Minister that I think it should be able to come back around September, October next year, which would give 2 years for a new council to be in before the next local government election unfortunately comes along, which is September 2024. So it would get back in cycle that way. The Minister has placed an order out there that there cannot be an election before the 8th of June, so September, October would fit within that, but the Minister will undoubtedly wait until she understands what the Commissioner's recommenders might be out of the public inquiry. So the Commissioner may decide that the organisation would benefit by not having councillors for the next couple of years and that there shouldn't be an election held until 2024. My view is that the predominant reason would be around the financial, and clearly we're trading well now. We've got the financial systems in place. We're reporting monthly. A lot of the major computer stuff has been sorted. So we're in quite a good position to continue on. And my other view is that I just don't believe that a newly elected council, that they came in, say, next year, is likely to misbehave, given that they want to go to an election, no doubt, and be re-elected in 2 years hence. And the third sort of thing that would come into play is that if the council looked like they were departing from the current plan and the financial objectives, then I believe the government would move earlier rather than later to appoint a financial controller, which would just be there to ensure that all expenditure was occurring in a proper and fit manner.
And you had one last, let's just say, innovation in the fact that you believe perhaps we should appoint a couple of councillors with high levels of experience to guide the rest.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I had a public meeting with residents at Kilcare, Hardy Bay area, and about 30 people there, and we had a good discussion about it, and the community there was saying very clearly none of the previous councillors should get back on council. And I said, well, we'll have to let democracy rule. But I said, just as a throwaway, what would you think of the idea if we actually somehow could appoint, say, 3 out of 15, 20%, say, councillors who had the right experience, but they were appointed. Now, don't ask me how you go about that, because I think it's a bit of a frivolous suggestion. But nonetheless, they all thought it was a great idea. So I thought I'd throw it out there.
There we go. It's interesting. Well, thanks for speaking with Central Coast Newspapers.
Thank you.
That's good. Right.